The council chamber was filled with voices, some angry, some fearful, and some cold and calculating. The alien leaders of several star nations had gathered to speak about the attack on the neutral colony of Halores. The colony had been destroyed by the Karth Dominion, a power known for its cruelty. No one could agree on what should be done. Some leaders spoke of sending protests, others wanted to remain silent, and a few whispered that nothing should be done at all. The images from Halores had been shown across the galaxy. Burning cities, shattered ships, and lifeless bodies floating in space were seen by billions. Everyone who looked upon the destruction knew what had happened. The Karth Dominion had committed murder on a scale that was hard to understand. They had destroyed a world that had no army, no defenses, and no reason to be attacked. But in the chamber, words and excuses filled the air, not action. In one corner of the chamber sat a representative of humanity. His name was Daniel Kearns, and he listened in silence. His expression was hard, his eyes sharp. He did not argue or plead. He simply remembered. For humanity had long ago made its law clear to the galaxy. The words were simple. Humans do not negotiate with murderers. When a crime so dark was committed, no treaties, no excuses, and no discussions were possible. There was only one response. The alien leaders remembered those words, though many wished to forget them. They knew humanity's history, the wars it had fought, and the enemies it had destroyed. Some thought the humans were too brutal, too quick to judge, too willing to burn what they could not forgive. But others feared them, because when humanity moved, they moved with finality. A tall alien named Zalrin spoke with a trembling voice. He represented a small coalition of worlds near the Dominion border. We cannot provoke them. If we act, they will turn their fleets on us. Better to remain silent, better to wait. Perhaps they will stop on their own. A deep voice answered from across the table. It belonged to an alien with gray skin and large eyes. And if they do not stop? If they come again, will you remain silent while your people die? The chamber filled with noise again. Everyone speaking at once, everyone arguing. And still Daniel Kearns said nothing. He simply tapped the table once and stood. When the voices died down, he spoke in a quiet but steady tone. Your people may choose silence, but ours will not. Humanity has given its warning many times. Murder cannot be forgiven, and it will not be ignored. The chamber fell silent. Some of the leaders shifted uncomfortably. Others lowered their eyes. They wanted to believe the humans were bluffing. They wanted to believe that humanity, with its small number of colonies and fleets, could not truly stand against the power of the Dominion. But deep inside, they remembered stories told by their elders. Stories of human wars where whole empires had been erased because they crossed a line that humans had drawn. Far from the council, aboard a ship that drifted quietly in the outer reaches of space, Admiral Laura Bennett watched reports of the Halores disaster. She stood in the command center of her flagship, her hands folded behind her back. Around her, officers worked at their stations, their faces grim. They too had seen the images, and they too remembered the law that bound them. Laura spoke to her first officer, a young woman named Claire Harris. The council debates. They will not act. They will whisper and wait as they always do. Claire nodded. And us, Admiral? Laura's eyes narrowed. We will act. We will prepare, and we will wait for the order. But we know the truth, Claire. The Dominion crossed a line. There is no return from that. The human fleet gathered in silence. Ships moved into position. Supplies were loaded, weapons checked. The crews did not complain or question. They knew what was coming. They had grown up hearing the words of their ancestors. Humans do not negotiate with murderers. In quiet conversations in mess halls and cabins, the men and women of the fleet spoke of what they had seen. Some were angry, some were sorrowful, and some were simply determined. They remembered the faces of the dead at Halores, the cries of survivors begging for help. They swore those voices would not be forgotten. Across the galaxy, rumors began to spread. Alien traders whispered in markets, saying that humanity was preparing for war. Merchants carried stories from system to system. The humans were gathering fleets, the humans were silent and grim. The humans were ready to strike. Some refused to believe, saying humanity would not dare challenge the Dominion. Others remembered old wars and said quietly that if the humans had made a decision, nothing could stop them. In the Dominion itself, leaders laughed when they heard of humanity's anger. They dismissed the warnings as the barking of a small species. They saw themselves as masters of the stars, their fleets larger, their armies stronger. They mocked humanity. saying that humans would never risk their survival in a hopeless war, but not all in the Dominion laughed. Some remembered the old stories too. They had studied human history, their endless conflicts, their wars of survival. They had seen the pattern. When humanity declared someone a murderer, that enemy always fell. They spoke their fears in whispers, knowing their rulers would silence them if they were heard. On the human flagship, Admiral Laura received a message from Captain Daniel Brooks, who commanded a task force near the border. His face appeared on the screen, his voice calm but firm. "We have survivors, Admiral. Their stories are clear. The Dominion slaughtered them without reason. Families, children, whole towns. They did not fight, they did not resist. They were murdered." Laura closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with a look of steel. "Then we have no choice," Daniel nodded. "The crew knows. They are ready." The communication ended, and Laura turned back to the stars on the screen. The galaxy still debated, still hesitated, but humanity had already made its choice. They remembered the law, written not on paper but in blood and memory. Murderers could not be reasoned with, only stopped. In the council chamber, the alien leaders argued late into the night. Some wanted to call upon humanity to wait, to calm their anger. Others wanted to distance themselves to avoid being caught in what was coming. Only a few dared to admit the truth, that they themselves should act, that they should stand with humanity. But their voices were small, drowned by fear. As the night passed and the stars turned over the quiet worlds, a sense of unease spread across the galaxy. The warning was remembered by all, even those who tried to deny it. Humanity does not negotiate with murderers. The words rang in every hall of power, in every chamber, in every whisper, and far away. In the dark silence of space, human ships lit their engines, ready to remind the galaxy that the law was not just words, it was action, it was judgment, and it was coming. Captain Daniel Brooks stood on the bridge of his ship, the Horizon, staring at the empty stars outside. The ship had been ordered to patrol near the border where the Halores colony once stood. The survivors had been taken aboard smaller transports, and Daniel had spoken with many of them himself. Their words stayed with him, sharp as knives. They had described fire raining from the sky, soldiers cutting down families, and whole towns erased in a single day. It was not war. It was murder. And Daniel knew humanity would not forgive it. The crew of the Horizon felt the same. They moved about the ship with quiet determination. Every face showed a kind of steady anger. They had all seen the images, they had all heard the stories, and they all understood what was coming. The Dominion believed itself untouchable, but the humans knew that belief would soon be broken. Daniel spoke softly to his first officer, a young man named Ryan Clark. The council still debates, but their words mean nothing now. The Dominion has chosen its fate, Ryan nodded. The fleet waits for the order. People are restless, Captain. They want to strike, Daniel sighed. We will, but when we do, it must be swift. We don't fight for revenge. We fight to make sure it never happens again. A signal came through from Admiral Laura Bennett. Her voice was calm, but behind it was the weight of a decision that could not be undone. Captain Brooks, prepare your task force. Your orders will follow soon. The galaxy watches, but it does not act. That leaves us. Humanity will answer. Daniel saluted the screen. Understood, Admiral. When the communication ended, Ryan looked at him with steady eyes. So it begins. Daniel gave a short nod. Yes, it begins. In the mess hall, the crew gathered to hear their captain speak. Daniel stood before them, his voice carrying through the room. You know what was done on Halores. You have seen the faces of the survivors. Children, parents, ordinary people. They were given no chance to live. The Dominion calls it conquest. I call it murder. And you know our law. We do not negotiate with murderers. We do not let them walk away. We end them. That is our duty. That is our promise, not just to our people, but to every innocent who looks to the stars and hopes for peace. The crew answered with a steady roar of agreement. They did not cheer wildly, for this was not a joyful mission, but their voices were strong, filled with resolve. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the alien civilizations waited uneasily. Reports from traders and scouts spoke of human fleets gathering in quiet formations. No great speeches were made, no threats shouted. Humanity said little. They simply prepared. And the silence was more terrifying than any threat could have been. In the Dominion capital, the rulers laughed at the rumors. They gathered in their grand halls, confident in their fleets and armies. The High Commander of the Dominion, a ruthless leader named Carthos Ve, spoke to his generals. "Let the humans bark their warnings. They will not act. They are too few, too cautious. And if they strike, we will crush them under the weight of our fleets. Their law is weakness dressed as strength." His generals laughed with him, but some did not. In private, a few whispered their doubts. They remembered human history studied in secret. They remembered that when humans made a promise, they kept it, no matter the cost. On the horizon, Daniel received another message, this one from a nearby colony that had taken in Halloris survivors. An old man appeared on the screen, his face lined with grief. He spoke slowly. "Captain, I lost my family on Halloris. I have nothing left. But I beg you, do not let their deaths be forgotten. Do not let their killers escape justice." Daniel's jaw tightened. "They won't. I promise you that." After the message ended, Ryan asked quietly, "Do you ever wonder if we can really do this, Captain?" The Dominion is vast. Their fleets number in the thousands. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. "It is not about numbers, Ryan. It is about resolve. The Dominion fights for power. We fight for justice. And that makes us stronger." Far away, Admiral Laura gathered with her senior officers aboard the flagship Resolute. She looked around the table at their faces, lit by the glow of star charts. "We have evidence. The Dominion committed crimes beyond forgiveness. The Council will not act. They argue and delay. But we will not. This is our burden. This is our choice. We strike not to conquer, not to expand, but to protect every life that would otherwise be crushed by their cruelty." One of the officers, a man named Peter Lawson, leaned forward. "And if the galaxy condemns us?" Laura's voice was steady. "Then let them. We do not need their approval. We need only to stand by our law." Her words carried through the fleet. Officers repeated them to their crews, and soon they were spoken in whispers across every ship. "We do not need their approval. We need only to stand by our law." As the days passed, human ships quietly slipped into position near Dominion borders. Carriers, cruisers, destroyers all moved with silent precision. The Dominion still did not believe. They saw the movements but dismissed them as posturing. They thought humanity would back down at the last moment. In quiet quarters aboard the horizon, Daniel wrote a message to his family on Earth. He told them he loved them, that he would fight with honor, and that he did not fear what was to come. He ended the message with simple words: "We must be what the galaxy refuses to be. We must be justice." The night before the first strike, Daniel walked the halls of his ship. He spoke with engineers checking the engines, with gunners readying the weapons, with medics preparing their stations. He offered a hand on a shoulder, a word of encouragement, a steady look. The crew did not need grand speeches. They only needed to know that their captain shared their burden. On the bridge, Ryan stood beside him as the final orders came through. Admiral Laura's voice filled the air. "Humanity answers. The line is drawn. You know what must be done." Daniel looked at his crew. Their eyes met his one by one. No one spoke, but the silence carried more than words ever could. They were ready. Beyond the stars, alien spies watched in fear. They saw the human fleets move, not with chaos, but with perfect order. They sent reports back to their governments, who sat in silence, unable to decide what to do. Some leaders prayed the humans would stop. Others prayed they would succeed. But none dared intervene. In the Dominion, a fleet commander named Varlek sent one last warning to his superiors. His message was short: "Do not underestimate them. Humanity fights differently. If we provoke them, we may not survive." His warning was ignored, and so the stage was set. Humanity had spoken its promise. The Dominion had chosen to laugh. The galaxy waited in fear and silence, and in the dark of space, Captain Daniel Brooks gave his final order to the horizon. "Set course for the border. Prepare all weapons. This is the beginning." The engines roared to life, the stars shifted, and the ship leapt forward into the unknown. Behind it, a fleet followed, silent and unyielding. Ahead, the Dominion waited, still mocking, still blind, but humanity did not mock. Humanity did not laugh. Humanity prepared to remind the galaxy of its law, and the law was simple. Murderers would not be forgiven. Murderers would not be spared. The response would be swift, and the stars themselves would fall silent in its wake. The human fleet moved with quiet precision. Ships spread across the void, dark against the stars, each crew member knowing what they carried upon their shoulders. The first strikes were not loud or reckless. They were planned with care, chosen to strike at the heart of the Dominion's strength without wasting a single shot. Humanity would not fight a long war if it could be avoided. Humanity fought to end. Admiral Laura Bennett stood on the command deck of the Resolute, her eyes fixed on the star chart glowing before her. Red marks showed Dominion strongholds, shipyards, command posts, supply stations. Each one represented the power the Dominion believed made them untouchable. Laura's voice was calm as she gave the order. Strike teams, move in. Cut the head and the body will die. Across the fleet, captains repeated her words. Among them was Captain Daniel Brooks aboard the Horizon. His crew sat ready, waiting for his command. Daniel looked at them, knowing they needed no speech. They already understood. Instead, he simply said, "This is for Halores. Fire when ready." The Horizon's weapons lit the dark, beams of light and missiles streaking across the void. The target was a Dominion command station orbiting a barren world. The station's defenses woke too late. The human attack struck with precision, breaking shields, tearing through armor, and leaving silence in its wake. Within minutes, the station that had once commanded whole sectors was nothing but wreckage drifting through space. Reports flowed in across the fleet. Each strike found its target, each Dominion stronghold crumbling under the human assault. Shipyards burned, fleets cut down before they could form ranks, outposts erased before they could send warnings. The humans moved like a blade, sharp and unyielding, cutting through the Dominion with a swiftness no one expected. On the ground, Captain Daniel led a mission with a small force to free survivors from a Dominion labor camp. The air was thick with smoke as they moved through the ruins. Soldiers kept their weapons ready, but their eyes widened at the sight of what had been done. The Dominion had worked prisoners to death, leaving them broken in chains. Daniel's team broke the locks and pulled the weak survivors to safety. One young woman, her face pale and thin, looked up at Daniel with tears in her eyes. "You came," she whispered. Daniel knelt beside her. "We came because no one else would. You're safe now." The survivors were taken aboard human transports, given food, water, and care. Word spread quickly across the stars. Humanity did not just destroy, they rescued. They did not conquer, they freed. And yet their wrath was as undeniable as their compassion. In alien markets and council chambers, the whispers grew louder. Stories poured in from witnesses. The humans struck without hesitation, their fleets unstoppable. Some called them saviors. Others called them terrifying. All agreed on one truth: humanity did not bluff. When they said they would end murderers, they meant it. In the Dominion capital, panic began to grow. Reports of lost fleets and burning outposts filled the halls of command. High Commander Carthos Vey slammed his fist against the war table. "How can this be? They are few, they are weak. How do they strike us like this?" A frightened officer spoke carefully. "Commander, they do not fight as we do. They do not waste time with warnings or demands. They attack where it matters most. They do not stop," Carthos sneered. "Then we will answer with everything we have. Gather the fleets. Crush them beneath our power." And so the Dominion prepared its counterattack, a force vast enough to sweep across whole sectors. They believed numbers would prevail. They believed the humans could not stand against the storm, but Admiral Laura already knew what was coming. Intelligence reports reached her desk, and she studied them in silence. "They will throw their full weight at us," she said to her officers. "Good. That makes them predictable." Her fleet spread out into hidden positions, waiting for the Dominion's massive armada to make its move. While they waited, she addressed her officers. "We will not match them in size, but we will match them in resolve. Remember this: we do not fight for conquest. We fight because someone must, and if we fall, then there is no one left to stand against them." Back on the Horizon, Daniel prepared his crew for what was coming. He walked the halls, speaking to engineers, gunners, and medics. Every word was simple, but every word carried weight. Hold the line. Protect each other. We fight for more than ourselves. That night, Daniel found himself in the quiet of his cabin, staring at a recording sent from Earth. It showed children laughing in a park, running beneath the sunlight. He thought of the faces he had seen on Halores, faces that would never laugh again. He swore he would not fail the living or the dead. When the Dominion fleet finally arrived, it filled the sky. Dozens upon dozens of warships, their weapons glowing, their formation a wall of steel. The Horizon's sensors trembled with the sheer size of the force. Ryan Clark, standing beside Daniel, whispered, There are so many. Daniel's voice was calm. Then we cut them down one by one. Prepare for battle. The first shots came from the Dominion, a storm of fire streaking across space. Human shields flared, but the fleets held their ground. Then, with a single command, Admiral Laura ordered the counterattack. The human fleet moved as one, weaving between the Dominion's massive ships, striking at weak points, tearing holes in their formations. Every shot was chosen, every strike deadly. The horizon fired volley after volley, tearing through a Dominion cruiser. The enemy tried to close in, but human ships slipped away like shadows, reappearing where they were least expected. The Dominion had numbers, but the humans had precision. And precision began to win. On the ground below, Daniel once again led a small team. Their target was a Dominion communications hub. If destroyed, it would blind the enemy's fleet. Fighting through resistance, the humans planted charges and pulled back, just as the station exploded, cutting the Dominion's command in half. Ships in orbit drifted in confusion, and the human fleet struck hard, breaking their lines. Hours passed, the battle raging like a storm. But slowly, surely, the tide turned. The Dominion's great armada began to fall. Their massive fleet, once thought unstoppable, cracked under the relentless human assault. By the time the fighting ended, wreckage drifted through space and silence returned. The galaxy held its breath as the news spread. Humanity had stood against the full might of the Dominion and won. Survivors told of how the humans fought with fire and steel, but also with mercy for those who surrendered. Whole worlds were freed, chains broken, camps emptied. Admiral Laura spoke to the fleet after the battle. Her voice carried to every ship, every crew member. Today we showed the galaxy what it means to stand against murderers. Today we proved our law is not just words, but this is not the end. The Dominion still stands, and we will not stop until they cannot harm another soul. Her words echoed in Daniel's heart. He stood with his crew, watching the wreckage fade behind them, knowing the war was far from over. But he also knew something else. The galaxy was watching, and the galaxy was learning. Humanity's law was no longer just a warning. It was a promise made real. The Dominion was furious. The loss of their great fleet was a wound they could not hide. Across their empire, whispers of fear spread. Worlds that once obeyed without question now doubted. Soldiers who had marched proudly now looked over their shoulders, afraid of what was coming. The humans had shown they were not weak, not afraid, and not willing to stop. And the galaxy watched in silence. High Commander Carthos Vey gathered what remained of his war council. His face twisted with anger. He slammed his hand against the war table. They are insects. They should have been crushed. Instead, they cut through us like fire through dry grass. I will not be mocked. I will not be defied. One of his generals, shaking slightly, spoke in a low voice. Commander, the humans fight with methods we do not understand. They strike at our leaders, our supply lines, our camps. They do not waste time on glory. They do not follow the rules of war. Carthos glared at him. Then we will drown them. We will send everything. Every ship, every soldier. If they think themselves strong, we will bury them under numbers. And so across the Dominion orders were given. More fleets were called from the edges of their empire. More weapons were forged. Planets were stripped of resources to feed the machine of war. The Dominion would gather its full might for one purpose, to destroy humanity. But humanity did not wait. Admiral Laura Bennett had already prepared the next step. She studied the reports in her command chamber. Her officers gathered around her. The galaxy was still silent, still unwilling to act. No other power sent fleets or soldiers. They all watched from a distance, waiting to see if humanity would survive or fall. Laura's voice was calm but firm. The Dominion prepares for war, but they still believe we will back down. They believe fear will stop us. But we are past fear. They murdered the helpless. They slaughtered innocents. We warned them and they ignored us. Now they will face the end. Her officers nodded, their faces grim. They knew what was coming. This was no longer a series of strikes. This would be the storm. On the horizon, Captain Daniel Brooks stood with his crew. They had repaired their ship after the last great battle, but the scars still showed. Burn marks along the hull, sections patched hastily, weapons cleaned and reloaded. The crew moved with quiet purpose, each one ready for the fight to come. Daniel spoke softly to his first officer, Ryan Clark. We know the Dominion will come with everything. They think they can overwhelm us, but they don't understand. This isn't just a war to us. It's justice, Ryan nodded. The crew believes in you, Captain. They believe in the fleet. And they believe in the law. Daniel looked out at the stars. Then we will show them. We will remind the galaxy why our law exists. Soon after, the Dominion unleashed its counterattack. Hundreds of ships, more than had ever been seen in one place, gathered like a storm cloud. They swept across border sectors, destroying outposts, hunting for the human fleet. Their goal was not just victory but annihilation. They wanted humanity erased, their colonies burned, their fleets scattered, but the humans did not meet them head-on. Instead, they struck like shadows. Small fleets appeared, attacked supply convoys, then vanished into the dark. Stations exploded without warning. Communication hubs were cut, leaving Dominion fleets blind. Again and again, the humans struck not with size but with precision. Karthos grew angrier with each report of failure. "Find them. Destroy them," he roared. But no matter how many ships he sent, the humans always seemed one step ahead. Then came the moment the Dominion feared most. The human fleet gathered not to strike small targets but to strike at the very heart of the Dominion. Admiral Laura led them in silence, her ships moving in formation toward the Dominion's capital system. When they arrived, the sky above the capital world was filled with steel. Dozens of human ships appeared at once, their weapons ready. The defenders scrambled to form lines, but they were too late. Laura's voice carried across the fleet. No more warnings. No more waiting. Today the Dominion falls. The first wave of human fire tore through orbital defenses. Massive stations crumbled, their explosions lighting the sky. Dominion fleets rushed to respond, but human ships cut through their formations with ruthless skill. Every move was planned, every strike designed to end the battle quickly. On the horizon, Daniel commanded his ship through the chaos. Missiles streaked across the void. Beams of light shattered enemy armor. The horizon moved like a predator, striking hard and then slipping away before the Dominion could react. "Keep the pressure," Daniel ordered. "Do not let them recover." The Dominion fought desperately, throwing ship after ship into the battle. But the humans did not slow. They advanced, burning their way toward the capital world itself. The Dominion's War Council panicked, their walls trembling as the reports came in. Whole fleets gone, command stations destroyed. The humans were coming for them. Karthos shouted at his generals. "Hold the line. We are the Dominion. We cannot fall." But outside, the truth was plain. The Dominion was falling. On the ground, Daniel led a strike team into the capital city. Their target was the Dominion's central command hub, the heart of its rule. Streets shook with explosions as they fought their way forward. Dominion soldiers resisted fiercely, but the humans pressed on. Step by step, building by building, they cut their way through. At last, they reached the command hall. The doors burst open, and Daniel and his team stormed inside. Karthos Vey stood at the far end, his eyes burning with hatred. "You dare come here?" he shouted. Daniel's voice was steady. "You murdered the innocent. You thought no one would stop you. But humanity does not forget. Humanity does not forgive." Karthos drew his weapon, but before he could fire, Daniel's team struck. The fight was short, brutal, and final. When it ended, Karthos lay defeated, his empire collapsing with him. Outside, the human fleet finished what it had begun. The Dominion's last defenses crumbled. Shipyards burned, fleets shattered, and the capital world itself fell silent under the weight of human firepower. The galaxy watched in awe and horror as one of its great empires was erased in a single campaign. Admiral Laura stood on the deck of the Resolute, her eyes fixed on the burning world below. She opened a channel to every ship, her voice calm but cold. "It is done. The Dominion is no more. Let the galaxy remember this. Humanity does not negotiate with murderers. This is the price of their crimes." The message spread across the stars, carried by traitors, survivors, and spies. Worlds that once feared the Dominion now whispered in silence. Humanity had done what no one else dared. They had ended an empire. On the horizon, Daniel sat with his crew. The battle was over, but their hearts were heavy. Ryan spoke softly. "It's finished." "But it doesn't feel like victory," Daniel nodded. "Because it isn't. We did what had to be done. Nothing more, nothing less." He looked out at the stars, now quiet after the storm. He knew the galaxy would never be the same. The warning had been spoken not in words but in fire. Murderers had been punished. And now the stars had fallen silent. The galaxy was quiet. The Dominion had been erased, its fleets destroyed, its command center shattered and its capital world a smoldering ruin. Survivors whispered across star systems, unable to speak loudly but passing the word. Humanity had acted. Humanity had fulfilled its law. Humanity did not negotiate with murderers. Admiral Laura Bennett stood on the deck of the Resolute, gazing at the aftermath. Fires burned across the Dominion's former worlds, but her eyes were not filled with joy. The price had been high, even if it had been necessary. She spoke to her officers, her voice steady and clear. The Dominion is gone. Its leaders will harm no more. But we must remember why we fought. It was not for power, not for glory. It was for justice. For every life they tried to take, we fought so they could live. Her officers nodded, their faces solemn. Each of them had watched ships burn, families die, and soldiers fall. They understood the weight of victory. It was not celebration they felt, but relief. Relief that the law had been enforced, that murderers would not walk free, that the galaxy had learned its lesson. On the horizon, Captain Daniel Brooks moved through the ship, checking on his crew. They had survived the final battles, but the scars were visible. Men and women leaned against walls, exhausted, their uniforms torn, their hands stained. Yet their eyes were bright with understanding. They had done what needed to be done. They had carried out the law of humanity. Daniel paused in front of Ryan Clark. "We made it. But the work isn't over," Ryan nodded. "The Dominion is gone. But the galaxy will take time to trust again." Daniel smiled faintly. "And they should. We've shown them what happens when murderers are left unchecked. Let them remember." Across the freed worlds, humans moved to help. Survivors were cared for, towns rebuilt, families reunited. Humanity did not conquer these places. They restored them. Every act of compassion was a reminder that while humans were ruthless against murderers, they were also protectors of the innocent. Alien civilizations, long silent, began to speak quietly. Some were grateful for humanity's intervention, some were fearful, realizing that no empire could cross humanity without consequence. Some wondered if they had underestimated a species they thought small and weak. Across star systems, stories spread. Humans had acted where no one else dared. Humans had made the law real. In the Dominion's former capitals, survivors who had hidden in fear emerged from shelters. They whispered of the humans who had saved them, of ships that moved like shadows and soldiers who freed the oppressed. Some could not understand why humans fought so fiercely, yet spared the innocent. The answer was simple. Humanity had a law, and it was a law of action. Murderers would not live, but the innocent would. Back on the Resolute, Admiral Laura addressed the fleet one final time. Her voice carried across all channels, reaching every ship. "The Dominion is gone. Their fleets are destroyed. Their leaders are no more. Humanity has spoken. Let the galaxy learn this lesson. Do not cross the line. Do not murder the innocent. For if you do, humanity will act. And when humanity acts, the stars will fall silent in judgment." On the horizon, Daniel looked at his crew. They had lived through fire, fought in darkness, and emerged to enforce justice. He spoke softly, but every word mattered. "We fought because there was no other choice. The law is not words on paper. It is action. We remember the innocent. We punish the guilty. That is what makes us human." Ryan placed a hand on his shoulder. "The galaxy will never forget." Daniel nodded. "No, they will not. And that is as it should be." As the fleets moved through the stars, returning to human space, a new silence spread across the galaxy. No one dared attack without cause. No one dared commit murder unchecked. Humanity had shown what it meant to enforce the law. Murderers had no place among the stars, and those who tried would find themselves facing judgment. The council chambers of alien worlds were filled with whispered meetings. Leaders discussed humanity in hushed tones, sharing tales of precision, strategy, and determination. Some feared that humanity could strike again. Others admired the resolve and discipline of a species that acted when all others hesitated. And all remembered the warning that had once seemed like a threat. Humans do not negotiate with murderers. In quiet corners of space, former Dominion soldiers and citizens pondered the meaning of the human campaign. Many realized that they had been part of a system that allowed cruelty to spread unchecked. Some chose to flee, some chose to hide, and a few began to understand the weight of actions. Humanity's law had reached beyond human space. It had become a force that reshaped thoughts and behaviors. Admiral Laura and Captain Daniel reflected on their duty. The cost had been high, yet they had upheld the law. They had seen destruction, yes, but also liberation. They had been instruments of judgment, yes, but also of protection. And as they looked at the stars, quiet and calm now after the storm, they knew the galaxy would remember this moment for generations. The survivors of Halores, now safe and beginning to rebuild their lives, spoke of humanity's action with respect. Children born after the war would hear the stories. Parents would tell them how humans had acted decisively, how they had honored the law, and how justice had been served. It was not victory they celebrated, it was certainty. Humanity had ensured that murderers would face consequences. In the fleets returning home, sailors spoke softly of their experiences. They remembered the fear, the tension, the moments when courage had been required. Yet they also spoke of triumph, of the relief of seeing innocents saved, of the knowledge that their actions had mattered. And in every ship across every star, the simple law of humanity echoed, murderers are not to be negotiated with. Justice will find them. The galaxy had changed. Silence had fallen, yes, but it was a silence of caution, of respect, and of understanding. Humanity had reminded the stars that actions carried consequences. That law was not just words, but force, that murderers could not escape, and so, as human fleets sailed home, as rebuilt colonies began to bloom, and as alien civilizations whispered in quiet respect, a new order emerged, not of fear, but of balance. Humanity had acted. The law had been enforced. The galaxy would not forget. Captain Daniel Brooks stood on the bridge of the horizon one last time, watching the stars that had been silent for so long. Ryan Clark stood beside him. Neither spoke for a long moment. Then Daniel finally said, "We did what had to be done. Now let the galaxy remember, and let the innocent live in peace." Ryan nodded. "They will remember, Captain. They will." The stars, quiet now after the storm of justice, seemed to shine a little brighter. Humanity had acted. Murderers had been punished. And across the galaxy, the law of action and justice would be remembered forever.